everybody, it's Amanda Ludi, and today we're going to paint something a little unusual than what we've done in the past. So I am painting with two colors. That's it. It's just a black and white painting, and it's gonna look awesome. I'm so excited. So there's lots of different things that you guys can do with this. So we can make it with or without the witch and just do a black and white tree setting, or you could leave the witch, you could put in a deer, you could do literally anything that you can think of. You could even do like a girl hanging from a swing. You could get as creative with it as you want. So I am using an 11 by 14 inch canvas, and again the colors are just black and white. Now I do put a generous amount of black, maybe not this much. It's not as big as the pile as you think. It kind of just spread. This is very liquidy black for some reason today. But you're gonna use two decent sized puddles of white and black on a plate. And then if you want to go bigger or smaller, this is a great painting to do whatever you want. I've done this in huge 16 by 20 inch canvases. I've done this in the 12 by 12, and don't mind the rattling sound. I have coffee making and it sounds like a tornado is coming when I make my coffee. But I just wanted to kind of jump on, give you guys the sneak peek of the painting on what it's gonna look like, and we'll go over supplies. So as far as supplies go, same brushes as always. We're gonna use the big flat brush. You're gonna use your angled flat brush, the one with the pointed tip. We have a round brush and a little tiny liner brush or a detail brush. So you're gonna need napkins. I'm using a recycled pickle jar today for my rinsing cup. So you just need some water and then your blank canvas. So before we do absolutely anything, the first step is to paint your whole entire canvas black. Now heads up, they do sell canvases at the store that are already black, already pre-made for you. So if you wanted to skip a step, you can always go and buy those. I've never really bought them. I know a lot of artists that have, but I've always just kind of painted my own. So I'm taking my big brush and I'm just gonna get started here real quick, and I'm gonna cover my whole entire canvas black, and that's gonna be my edges, you know, my sides. This way when it's done and ready, I can just hang it up and I don't have to worry about my edges being bare or going and buying a fancy frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and just spread this all around and then cover it, and we'll start the next step. Okay guys, so right now I have my whole background painted and it's less noisy. I apologize about that. My dog and my cat were over here just like chowing down on their food that they left over from this morning, and now decided because I'm filming they want to eat it. So sorry about all the noise. We are noise free. So this is gonna have to be completely dry if I didn't mention that before. So if it's still wet, go ahead and pause me and then come back to it. If you want to speed up the process, you could definitely get a hair dryer and just hold it away from your painting and dry it quickly. Acrylics, they do not take long at all to dry. They could take about 2 minutes sometimes, depending on, you know, how much you put on. It could be more or less, but I'm saying mine, I put one coat. It's probably gonna take about 4 minutes to completely dry, just letting it do its thing without me fanning it or anything. So this has to be completely dry, so when we go to put the white on top, it doesn't suck all of that like black into it and distort the color. Eventually we're gonna have lots of grays, but our light source is going to be the first thing that we do. So taking a look at this picture here, we're going to start our way in the middle and work our way out. So the middle is going to be extra bright, and then we'll fade it in by putting some black. So I just like to start off with a fresh, clean black canvas, dry, ready to go. Whenever you are finished, I just rinse my brush real good. It's hard to get the black out, so if you want to just kind of rub it on a napkin, that will help. Oftentimes with black, you got to kind of scrub the brush on the bottom just to help get a lot of that dark color out, but that will do the trick. You don't always have to go and rinse this dirty bucket. If you do just that, you'll be okay. So go ahead, take your time. If it's real shiny, it's still wet, you could do the little finger test, and you can always paint right over a little smudge. But if it's shiny, I would wait a little bit longer, and then we'll come back. Okay guys, we are ready to paint. So I do have a few little tiny marks that are still wet, but that's okay. It's not in my main area where I need it to be completely dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use, depending on what size canvas you're using, again, this is an 11 by 14. If you're doing, let's say a 16 by 20, you might want to use this bigger brush just so it doesn't take forever, because I'm going to be using my little tiny angle flat brush, and it's going to be like a checkered look. If you can see real closely, you can see my brush strokes. It is not completely smooth. I did not like, I mean, I did do a lot of blending, but it's not perfection. I didn't really want it to be that way. You want it to blend any particular way, like in circles, so it's smooth. Like for an example, let me see if I have, here's a good example. I did a moon design where it was like a different color, and then as it goes out, it got more purple. And see how smooth it looks? Like you really don't see the streaks. If you want it to look like that, you can. But mine, I purposely wanted it to be the checkered strokes. Very like impressionistic, not abstract, but I wanted to see that visibility. But in the same time, it does fade out very nice. So I'm gonna show you how to get that look. It'd be better for the bigger canvases to use the big brush. However, I don't know if I would necessarily want to use the big brush on a smaller canvas. You might not get all those strokes that you're after. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my angled flat brush, and when I hold the brush, it's going to be like the flat part gets laid onto the canvas, and I just kind of flip the brush to get the paint off on both sides. And there's no particular way you need to hold the brush or make it go. I just kind of plop it anywhere. So first things first, we're gonna start off with our lightest color, and that's gonna be your white. The light source I'm gonna have come from over here, so it's gonna kind of look like there's a break in the trees. You can see the light coming through, and I'm gonna have that be right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of do a checkered pattern. Now, as you can see, it's very pixelated looking. I can see through the paint. So what I'm gonna do is kind of wet my brush into my bucket, tap off the extra water, replenish my white, and you see how it kind of smooths out the paint. It was just a little too dry the first time. Anytime your paint that's dry like that, re-dip into your bucket, grab more paint, and then continue. Now, as you can see, I'm kind of overlapping like this. I don't want to see hardly any black in that center, okay? So that's about as big as it's gonna be, just a little section like this. And then you're gonna eventually start to lighten up your color. So what you'll do is take little bits of black at a time and mix some more white into it, because the farther you go out from the middle, it's gonna be darker. So we're going for like a silver color now. And you could put a few coats of this in the center, just don't overdo it. And then I'm gonna re-dip into my bucket and grab more paint. So you can overdo what you just did. If that happens and you put a little too much of the dark in the center, wait for it to completely dry and then go back over it with white. That's the easiest way to cover up any mistakes. So then I'm gonna grab a little more black, and that was way too much. Again, you just want it to gradually get darker and darker and darker. So if you make something a little too dark, just put more white back into it. And we're gonna do this over the whole entire thing. I wouldn't worry about your edges. I just decided to skip the wraparound look, and I just painted it a solid black, like how I have here, and left it be. If you want to do this on the sides when you get to there, you can. So now, as you can see, I went even darker. So I'm gonna put just a few, not a whole bunch, but just a few, just to kind of tie it in to the painting. I put a little bit through that middle. And the cool thing about this is this kind of design, like the patchy look, it's gonna make it kind of look like there's some trees in the background. Like it's just a suggestion of some greenery back there or some branches, because it's so patchy. Like it looks like something's back there, but it's just not very visible because you're not zoomed in on it. Kind of like when you take a picture and what's in the front is the most clear, and then as you look to the background, it's very kind of distorted, fuzzy, because it's not the main focus. So this is looking pretty cool. So just remember, I think the biggest thing when I teach this is people think they have to go like this, and they separate everything. So that's a no-no, because that leaves a lot of open space. So don't worry about things not being the same size. Just fill it all in. So now I'm gonna get even darker. So I'm just taking more and more black into my color. And if it's not very noticeable, just add more black. There we go. Now my edges are gonna be extremely dark. So definitely make sure, because I know like this area here, I'm nowhere close to using that dark color. So you gotta go back and forth between the lights and the darks quite a bit. But I'm really gonna heavily in the corner make that a really, really dark color. And just kind of pull some of the dark into the section here. Make sure you keep re-wetting the brush. I'm gonna go back into some light color and kind of put a little in here. The best way to kind of blend the painting is just go back and forth between lights and darks and overlap them. Because when the two colors meet, the light and the dark, they'll merge into like the type of color that you need. You can overdo it. If you go back and forth so many times in a particular spot, see how it kind of took out all my dark and some of my light, it's all one color. Don't go over stuff too much, because the more you do, it'll just create it into one color. So that's why it's very important. See how I'm going back in with some white? That's why it's very important to not overdo it. The more you go back and rub it in, it's gonna be extremely hard to get all those different variations of color. So from time to time, you'll kind of see me go back and put a little more white in or black. When both colors are wet, they do blend very well, but don't overdo it. So here's another helpful thing, you guys. Let's say you're having a hard time transitioning from one to the next. What I would recommend is you rinse your brush all the way. So with a clean brush, then just very lightly go into your painting and just a couple times here and there. Before your painting dries, go over it and you'll kind of see everything just kind of softly fades into each other. So if you're trying to have a more smoother look, not very patchy, or one color just isn't going into the next very well, rinse your brush all the way and do this before everything dries. Now this part, I'm starting to lose a lot of that lighter color, so I'm gonna try to avoid going into the middle, but I'm just rinsing my brush and then doing the patching with the paint I already have on the canvas. And look at how it kind of smooths it out. You still see the patching, but see how it's really nicely fading? That is a really important little trick. So once you kind of have all your colors on there, and it's really hard without making it mucky and all go into one color, you can just fade everything into each other with what you already have on the canvas. I'm really gonna rinse this out once I get more towards the middle. And I'm gonna try to pull it outward. If you have a little bit of dark in your middle, that's okay. Just you really wanna make sure, you know, you keep a lot of that white. Now I'm starting to get really, really dark, so I'm gonna wait for that to dry. And then I'll go back and put a little bit more white in there. So I'm going to continue on, and I'll do the exact same thing I did earlier when I'm done with this section. So we'll get all our main colors on, and then we'll nicely smooth them all together. So I'm kind of mixing like a darker gray at this point. And I know it's time consuming, but it all comes together. You really can't miss doing this part. This is why I recommend if you're doing like a bigger canvas, you might want to switch to a bigger brush because you will be here forever. It'll be here still going. My paint's getting dry. I'm gonna re-wet the brush. And another thing too is if you have some lighter like bits showing like out here, that's okay. Maybe the light is hitting a tree and it's just a little brighter over here. It doesn't all have to be in the middle, but you want most of it to be. So if you accidentally put a few lighter spots over there, don't feel you have to cover it up. I'd love to know what you guys think of this technique. Some people, they absolutely love it. This is personally like one of my favorite types of painting are these like little patches. If you are interested in learning more about like this type of art, one artist, oh, you absolutely have to look him up, whether or not you're like into his subject matter. He kind of paints a little bit of everything, but he's the artist of color. His name is Leonid Alfremov. Sadly, he passed away, I think it was in 2020, maybe early 2021. I'm not 100% sure, but his family still sells his work and stuff, but he was very, very talented. He did a lot of his style of work with the patches like this, but he would do like really detailed people, cityscapes, landscapes. One of my favorite is he did like a sailboat, and it's just with all these colors using this technique, and it became very popular. A lot of people really love his art and put it up in their homes. I like to paint it myself. It's beautiful, but that's kind of where I get my inspiration for doing the patchy type of painting. I like when you can see brush strokes and nothing is perfect. Like, sometimes it's good to be different and do things different. So just about there, right at this point is where I'm gonna go into my black and start really loading up the black like around the edges. And just making sure, you know, everything comes together. So it's definitely looking like it's fading out from light to dark. I'm gonna go put some more black on my edges here, and then before it dries, I'll go back and kind of make sure everything fades together. Like right here, it's not fading well. So I'm gonna rinse my brush and then very lightly, see how it's now fading into the color? Sometimes if you're like really into the dark black, you're gonna have to rinse a couple times, so you're not pulling a lot of that black into that area. And again, don't overdo it. The more you go over a section, it will just kind of turn it into a muddy blob. So I am pretty happy with this. I'm gonna finish my bottom here. Let's see if I can get away with the paint I already have on the brush. Last thing I'm gonna do, I am gonna put a little more of the lighter color. And the reason being, especially because, you know, the light source, but another reason is if you're gonna add a witch, or if you're gonna add a deer or a different animal, you're gonna be using black paint for this silhouette. So you're gonna wanna make sure you have a light enough background that's really gonna show your animal or your witch, so it doesn't just like kind of fade into the painting and you don't even know it's there. You want some pretty heavy contrast, so that's why I really make sure this area, or wherever you're gonna put, you know, your silhouette, it's gonna be visible. So I really kind of just make sure I go back into my lighter grays and put it in this section. If it is not becoming light enough, wait for it to dry and then go ahead and go back over it. So my witch is going to be about here. So I'm just going to go back, make sure I'm happy with the color. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I think I'm gonna stop here in a second. Maybe a little more right here and I'll call it done. starting to go over it too many times. I'm going to put a little more back in. Again, don't push too hard, especially if you're putting white back in. The lighter you press, the easier it will lay on top. And what do I think, you guys? I think that looks pretty cool. I'm gonna rinse my brush, just smooth out a few of these like spots right here, and that's it. I'm gonna be done. So now is when you're gonna look it over, see what you wanna fix, and if you're happy with it, we're gonna do the same thing as before where we let this dry. So the whole thing, this whole background's gotta be dry. I think we're good. I don't think I want to mess with it. I smoothed out some of those rougher edges, some of the shapes I didn't like with the brush, and I think I'm happy with this. Once we get the trees in there, oh my gosh, is this gonna look cool. Everything looks faded. It transitions from light to dark pretty well. Down here in the corner, I didn't get so detailed, but we're gonna put grass and stuff in there later, so I wouldn't get too picky. Maybe just a little more gray. But yeah, I think we're good. So I'm gonna stop, let this dry, and then we're gonna start by doing trees. The last thing we're gonna do would be the silhouette. And then we'll kind of create like our paths and grass, and yeah, so let this dry and then we'll come back and do the next step. All right, you guys, so our canvas should be dry. Everything should be set to go. You should be happy with it, because once we go to this next step, there's no turning back. It's gonna be very hard, because we're gonna work on trees now. So before we begin trees, just keep in mind, okay, you want to make sure wherever your latest spot is, that's where, if you're gonna put a witch, an animal, whatever you want to put, it's gonna be over top of the latest spot. So mine would be about right here. This way you can see the black silhouette. So try not to put any branches hanging low or trees very close to where you're gonna need the room. If you want to right now, you could go ahead and sketch like your design. A helpful thing too, you guys, if you're not very good at drawing, I'm gonna go over how to do this in a separate training. But if you look in like a technique video, I do often talk a lot about this. Let me go ahead and pull this up. So I will show you how to go ahead, and if you are uncomfortable freehanding something, I have this stuff right here, and this is called carbon paper. And depending on how big you get them, they come in these huge sheets. I often don't need big sheets like this, so what I'll do is, see how I cut like a square out. This is so helpful, because when I sketch something, or if I'm unsure of something, I'll go ahead and draw on like computer paper, or you can draw by using tracing paper right here. And I got a couple things that I've done here. I have, for example, I was doing a lion. Oh, my papers are flying. Okay, I have a lion here that I did. And then what I did was tape the carbon paper to the back. And you have to put the carbon paper the right way. So kind of test it, make sure, like a little scribble so you know it's coming off. The darker side is facing the bottom. But all it is just basically what you use on a pencil. What you do is you then go over your design. You could even print something off of the internet, like a witch silhouette or a deer silhouette if you're uncomfortable drawing it. And then you just put this carbon paper under whatever image you're doing, and it transfers right onto your canvas. So if you don't feel comfortable drawing your own deer or witch, whatever you're going to do, you can do that. I do have technique videos that I've done. If you want to check those out, I can get those posted below. But the technique videos are awesome when it comes to learning like new tips and tricks and stuff like that. So I'll make sure if you didn't see it, I can get that for you. But super, super helpful. It's something very handy. So if you wanted to even go and sketch that on now with a pencil, so you know not to go over it, that's something you can do like right away. I'm just going to do it later because I'm going to freehand. But for your trees, you're going to use two brushes here. I'm going to use, for the trunk, my angled flat brush. And then, depending on the size, I will use a special round or detail or liner brush. So sometimes these round brushes can be very thick. You see the difference here on one I have. Depending on what you have, I wouldn't use the thicker one. Unless you're doing a huge canvas, I would stick to a smaller one. But what we're going to do is we're going to start with the black trees. And then it's going to get like a little bit lighter. And then we'll have some like really, really silver type of trees. So the further away from your light source, I'm actually going to make those little smaller trees white. Just gives a cool effect to it. Now with your tree, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Your trunk is always going to be the thickest part. When you start to go up, you're going to go thinner. And then especially on your little branches, you'll use your little liner brush. Smaller trees, you're going to want to make the trunks, you know, a lot thinner than your taller trees. You can overlap branches. They don't all have to be side by side. You can, you know, cover them up. And that's about the basics of it. If you can kind of see a pattern on here, see how everything kind of looks like a letter Y? Very helpful for making branches, to keep that in mind. So I'm just going to make sure my brush is really stuck together. So on both sides, I'm going to load up and flatten the brush. And I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up to the top. Sometimes I do it the other way, but with this brush, I'm going to do it this way. And I'm going to come not from the way bottom. I'm going to put some grass here and a pathway. So I'm going to come up maybe a little bit. Again, make sure it's not where you're going to have your silhouette. And I'm just going to come up and don't make it perfect. Don't make it perfectly straight. That you want some character. Now I'm just going to thicken up this bottom here. And then gradually, like, there we go. Make it a little bit thicker up there. I'm just adding a little more black. I pulled a little bit of white into my brush. There we go. Now, I'm gonna do, let's see, the other side. Same way. Maybe this one I'll curve it a little bit. See how it made it a little bumpy? Again, you don't want it perfect. Perfect, and then maybe it'll split. We'll make it split like that. I'll do, let's see, one more. And as you go up, I just push real lightly. And I have them going off the top of the canvas. I want some tall trees. And then over here, same thing. If you accidentally make something thicker up top, just make it thick again on the bottom. There we go. See how here on this side, I'm looking at it, it got thin in the middle. I'm just gonna thicken it up and then re-thicken it down here. And that's perfect. I am done with this brush for the whole painting now. So I'm gonna go ahead and rinse it and then put it aside. I'm now gonna go into my round brush. Again, it's a smaller one, or you can use your liner brush for doing this next step. And that's gonna be making these bigger branches. So I'm just gonna come out from inside the chunk, push a little hard, just a little bit. You don't want it thicker than down here, but then you're gonna lightly press as you come out so it's not really thick. Just push light as a feather. We're gonna make some bigger branches, and then off of these branches, that's when we'll switch to the tiny, tiny brush. These are our main branches. So I'm gonna make maybe one right here. And again, these are very like wavy, they're not perfectly straight. Sometimes like they'll bend or break. You can have it kind of crooked. Just try your hardest to not make these thick. This is probably the hardest part, is keeping a steady hand and making sure you keep everything proportioned correctly. Let's see here. Maybe I'll do some that come off of this. Go straight up. And this is the fun part. Like, you just use your imagination and see where it takes you. Every painting I do is always different, because especially with trees, they're all unique in their own way. So I just kind of look everything over and make sure like where it meets the tree, it's a little thicker and doesn't get like real skinny at one point. Like, you want everything to flow just right. Now, when you have your main branches and you're happy and you're ready to start adding some smaller ones, I'm gonna put this one aside and switch to my liner brush. Now, this brush likes to split apart easily. What I do is just kind of twist the brush and pull, and you get a perfect point. Now, frequently, you're gonna have to re-wet your brush and replenish the paint so it gets like nice ink consistency. You wanna keep the brush wet, not dripping wet, but wet, so this way it doesn't dry up on you and it can easily mess up your painting. Sometimes I slightly, if this is dry, I'll slightly rest my hand on the canvas to kind of keep it nice and steady. But you want to make sure you are keeping this brush with every branch wet and re-grabbing more paint, because there's barely any hair on the brush to leave it wet. So just keep that in mind. It's great for adding little detail, but it can be challenging to work with it. And again, I just kind of make like a little Y, like say I pull a little branch off of there and here. You guys see that okay? And you can get as detailed with this as you want. Sometimes if you Google like a tree in the winter, you can kind of get a good visual for how to paint them. Luckily out my window, I'm in my dining room and I have a lot of woods and I can kind of see how a lot of the trees look and how I want to curve them or how I want the ends of them to be. This part can be very time consuming. When you're painting leaves, it could be a little bit easier because you're covering a lot of those branches, you know, with the leaves. But these, it's a little more detailed. So it does take a while. But if you want, you can pause me. Take your time. I'm gonna stop here for a minute though, because I want to show you the next two colors, and then you can go ahead and put me on pause and then do your own thing. But what we're gonna do is switch now to my round brush again, and what we're gonna do is just add smaller trees. So for example, it's the same exact thing as the tall one. It's just you're not gonna make the trunks as thick. Maybe I'll do a couple little trees here. So I'm just gonna lightly press and thicken up my bottom here a little bit. And that's about as tall as I'm gonna get. I'm not gonna get tall. I want some little baby trees, like little tiny ones. In nature, you're gonna have trees that are all different sizes. Then maybe I'll do another little baby tree. I'm just trying my best not to make my trunk too big. So if you wanna keep working with that little brush, you absolutely can. I just wanna keep these small. Maybe I'll do one more, like right here. And then on the other side, maybe I'll put like a little baby tree in there. Maybe one more here. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do white with a little black into it to make silver. There. And on the edge, I'm gonna make a lighter color tree. And I'm just overlapping. Oh, I got really thick up there. My brush was not wet enough. So I'm gonna go back and kind of correct that. You wanna make sure like you're putting a lot of water into your paints because they can dry up at this time of the painting. So if you want, if you just made a boo-boo, you can wipe it away with a baby wipe or a damp paper towel. Just got to be careful if you do that because it will pull the paint from the bottom if you push too hard. And that if you do that, a mistake, before you can, wipe it off, it's already dry. What I would do is wait for it to dry, maybe paint over it some of that darker color, or just go to the bottom and thicken that up. So biggest tip is just really make sure when you're doing your trees that your paint is staying nice and wet, so it's like an inconsistency. But I'm just gonna do 2 white trees on the edge. You could do more if you wanted to. I'm just thickening this up. Perfect. And then maybe one more, but I'll do a little bit more gray. There, that's good. And then you'll take your little brush now and you are ready to go ahead and complete your forest. So you'll go in with this. You can overlap the black if you wanted to, or you can make them look like they're tucked behind your tree. You gotta pick one or the other though. I just do them on top. It's just a lot easier. I got a little too much water. There we go. It was starting to really thicken that up. Sometimes you can have too much water in the paint. So you just have to have that perfect consistency. There we go. Much better. There. So what I'm gonna do, you guys, I'm gonna start finishing up some of my branches here. I think we're all pretty comfortable now. So it's just the same thing we did with those first few trees, and you can add as many details as you want. And we're gonna make sure we fill in, you know, the little branches down here on those little trees. So I'm just gonna come here and add a couple branches here and there. So we'll put us on pause. Take your time. Get it exactly how you want it. And then the next two steps will be to add our silhouette and then some grass. So we have our trees exactly how we want them. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of make a decision, if you haven't already, on what you're going to do for your silhouette. If you don't even want to put a silhouette, you don't have to. What I would recommend is maybe do some more trees if you're not going to do anything else with it, by doing like a gray color, like a light gray, so it kind of looks like it's fading into the background, and make them smaller so it kind of looks like you're going back into the woods. So that would be what I would do if you're not going to have like something that's your main focus right here. I'm going to go and do a witch, and I'm going to need my little tiny brush for this. If you, like I said, feel more comfortable doing like tracing paper or something like that, you could definitely like print off my witch. Just make sure it's like the right size. But you could take the image, print it out, find one on Google. You could just take one off there and print it and then trace it on. I just kind of went with whatever was in my head. You can make her have long hair, you can make her have short hair, you could change up her outfit. This is your painting. You do it how you wish. But I'm going to show you step by step. I'm going to zoom in on how to do the witch, because that's what I'm teaching for Halloween. But let me see, I'm going to zoom in. There we go. So you can kind of see I'm kind of cut off. So, oops, sorry guys. Her hat will kind of be in the middle of this canvas here. But obviously if you're doing a different type of canvas, you're going to want to place her differently. But I have my flat brush, not flat brush, my liner brush, my little tiny one here. So it's just very important when you use this that they're stuck together, they're not splitting apart. And you want to make sure your paint is nice and wet, like an inconsistency, but not flowing and running all over, or else that's gonna make it very messy. But I'm gonna have her dress come down to the bottom of the painting too. I like to start with the head first. It's the easiest part, okay? So the head, what I'm gonna do, let's do her hat to begin with, so we know. We're gonna kind of curve like a frowny face. And then we'll put a point on the hat and come down and come down. Now definitely pause me, you guys. If you make your hat too big, just remember you're gonna have to have her placed correctly, so don't make it too big. I would wipe it off if you make it accidentally too big. Just remember, however big her hat is, you gotta have the head to fit in it. So that's about as big as I'm gonna get. Now this part, let me make sure you guys can like really see this. Okay. This part can be extremely tricky because you're gonna have like the forehead sticking out and then the nose sticking out and maybe the top of the chin. Let's do the back of her head first. Just kind of make it the size of the head and stop where the neck would be. And then do the same on this side, but make it a little thinner because we're gonna come out for the forehead and the nose. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna just slightly round out the forehead a little bit here. And then this, you can definitely overdo this, but just slightly put a nose sticking out. And I'm just pressing so lightly. If it's easier to watch me and then rewind me, that's what I would recommend. So now for the lips, you're gonna come in a little bit so the nose sticks out, but then you're gonna come back out for the chin, okay? Then curve in and then put your neck. And then I would fill in this whole head part so you can see the whole completed picture. Now she's got a big nose on her. What I would do is just then make the mouth come out a little bit more. And then if you need to make adjustments to like the chin, you could do that. Just be very careful. And there we go, we got a head. Now I'm gonna round out the back of the head here a little bit, and I'm gonna make her chin, or not her chin, her neck, sorry. Now this is a side shot of her, so you're not gonna come out wide, you know, make the chest and the hips and everything. You're just seeing a side silhouette. So let's do the hair later. What we're gonna do is we're gonna come down. So this would be her arm. And then you're gonna make like her shoulder here come out. And like her chest area here come out. And then come back in where the waist would be. Like that. Now this is where we're gonna make her dress and stuff in a second, but let's go ahead and do her hair. So I decided to do long hair, so what I'm gonna do is just one little strand at a time here. The ends are where you're really gonna see the details, so I just kind of let a couple like little wavy lines come out, just so you can see like her hair. Like as she's walking, it might flip out into the wind, so you can just kind of flip it out. And just make sure, you know, like Her head's rounded, the hair is falling nicely alongside her back of her head and her back. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make her butt, and then I'm gonna put her dress in at whatever length you want the dress. And then the same thing here, she's kind of walking forward, so you're gonna put the dress just a little bit, not too extreme out in the front. And then just make whatever, you know, adjustments you need to her outfit and fill her in. So I know this is very tricky. That's why sometimes, you know, drawing it on paper beforehand can be easy. Tracing paper is probably easier because then you can see through it onto your canvas to know where to put her. But that's why I would say, yeah, definitely do that if you're uncomfortable doing it this way. So I'm gonna zoom out so you can see how she looks. Ta-da! There's our witch. Okay, so last but not least, we need to make something on the bottom so she doesn't look like the trees and her are floating into the air. So I'm done with my little brush for now. Definitely pause me if you're not ready to go to this next step. But this is the last part of the painting, and that's gonna be adding some bushes, adding some grass. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my angled flat brush or a round brush, and I'm gonna take black with a little bit of white to make a gray. Now, this is a very messy part. It's very similar to up top, except this time we're just gonna like be dabbing. And right here, I'm gonna add a bush. Dab, 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 adding a bush. And when I get to my tree here, I'm gonna stop. Now, I did kind of just poke around. I left a little bit of black showing. I'm gonna go put a little more black in here, just because we don't want it all one solid color. So I'm gonna put a little bit of black and dab it in between. And we're just gonna do this now alongside our witch here, along the bottom of our tree. Dab, dab, dab. I'm gonna add a little more black in here now. Dab, 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 just to ground those trees, create some shadows. It was very light down there. So another thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add like a walking path. Now the walking path is gonna be the blackest part on the bottom, maybe even the blackest part of the whole painting. What I'm gonna do is have it like she's walking from out this way. So I'm just gonna go put some really dark black. I just kind of pat it in. And I'm gonna go under her dress, okay? And then I'm gonna come over the side. And then I'm just gonna come over here and put this black pathway in here, like that. Next, what I'm gonna do is add in some grass. Now you can go back and put a few more gray bushes if you want, like down here. Now that, to me, that's a little too bright. I mean, I could get away with it because I don't have many trees here, so the light would be really shining. But I really don't want anything too bright that takes away from your witch or whatever design you used. But just make sure, you know, you're not going over your path. So make sure you get that back in. So the next thing we're gonna do, you could use the tip of that brush, or you could go to your round brush or detail brush. If I'm going too fast, slow me down, go ahead and pause me. But the last thing is to do some grass. I do light grass that's a little too light, so then I go over it with some black, and all it is are these little tiny strands of grass. All I'm doing is with different variations of color of gray, I'm gonna flick up, okay? Just with a flick of a wrist, make sure you're like watering your color to an ink, and then you're just gonna flick up. You can go over your path, just don't cover it all the way. This grass is really gonna complete your painting. The farther in the back you add your grass, you're gonna wanna make it a lot shorter. Like back here, you can go add some grass. But the farther back, it's gonna be a lot smaller to give your painting some depth. This will help ground those trees. So you're gonna wanna put some grass like in front of your trees. Just don't cover your path. You don't wanna cover that dark path she's walking on, because that's what's grounding down your witch. If you cover up with some tall grasses here and there, that's okay, but see how I can still see my pathway there? I don't like that this line is so noticeable too, so I mean, you could even take your little brush and with some black or some lighter colors, you can do some little shrubs, some little tiny bushes here. Sometimes that little extra detail, going back and forth between the light and darks, like add a little bush there, just makes it look a little more realistic. If you have to, you can always pull down your trees even further if they're not really working out to what you had on here. You can move your trees around like by pulling them down a little bit further if you have to. And I'm just gonna continue doing my grass the whole way over. And put some grass back here too. Now because there's a bush here, that's not gonna be that bright. So like if you have some grass in front of a bush, maybe make it darker. But yeah, you guys, so I'm just adding some little grass here and there. Grass can overlap each other. Some are tall, some are short. It's just the woods. It's all different. If you decide you want to add more trees, you can do that. I'm just about done. Add a little bit of grass up here. Again, you're gonna make that a little shorter. If it's too light, you can go ahead and put some black back in it. And I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I'm just adding a little more black to the bottom of those trees, widening them up a little bit. And I think we're done. And the last part will be to sign your name. You can sign your name. I would recommend when it's completely dry to do that, because you want to kind of stick with the black and white look. I mean, you could add a color to your name if you wanted, but I would recommend sticking with the black or white or gray. I would do maybe a lighter gray, like in the corner somewhere, but it's up to you. Whatever you want to do, it's your painting. And I put some grass on the witch, but I don't like it. There we go. So I'm just kind of going over my grass, checking it out, seeing if I want to add anything, and when you think you're done, that's it. Now heads up, one last thing, like your trees and your witch, the black, depending on what brand you're using, you may want to give a second coat of black, like on your witch's dress and stuff, just to make sure she's completely covered. And sometimes, for example, you might pull in, like I did, a little bit of gray. You really want to make sure she is black so you don't have streaks of gray in her. So I'm just going back over her with one more coat. And we are finished, you guys. So thank you so much for painting with me. I want to see your pictures, hear how you like this one. And I'm excited to see if anybody changed anything on this one. Something cute you could maybe do is add like an owl in the tree. If you want to have a cat walking with your witch, or if she wants to hold like a cane or a lantern, that might be something cool. I did one painting where I put a cauldron in the center, like she was like doing something in the woods with her cauldron. The smoke was coming up. It looked really cool. But yeah, there's so many things you can do to this one to change it up if you want. But that's the end of it. And then if you ever wanted to add like glitter or anything to it, it might be kind of cool. I never really did it to this one. If you wanted to do it to the grass to look like mildew, that might look kind of cool. But yeah, so thanks for painting with me, you guys. And then until next time, I'll see you guys soon. All right, bye.